You know that movie Karate Kid? No, not Cobra Kai. And God, no, whatever that was, no. The original, the classic. This movie became a hit in 1984, and while you can argue it's because of the over-the-top villains, or the new kid on the block love story, or the coming-of-age underdog thing that's going on, I think it's mainly because of this guy. He's a surrogate father figure and a sensei, but I think this guy represents something much more powerful, hidden wisdom. And I think this scene speaks volumes. Sorry, wrong one.
Show me wax on, wax off.
Now, I'm not saying that doing chores in a certain way can lead to building muscle memory for martial arts. Who knows, that actually might work. But what I'm saying is hidden wisdom is still wisdom nonetheless. And for art, I've found a few of these techniques that seem like they're nonsense, but they're actually hidden wisdom. So let's get started. Number 1, get references, but don't use them. Now, before you freak out, I need all my information, dude. I need all those pictures. This is what I found from my experience and the research that I've come across over the years. Have you guys ever read the amazing book, The Art Spirit? It's a book by Robert Henry, one of the more famous painting instructors from the late 19th century. And more importantly, this dude was a big proponent for realism, which is pretty relevant here. Anyway, I've read this book in a few different sessions over the course of the years. It's kind of a constant resource that you should have with you at all times. I know I do. Anyway, Robert brings up a cool idea in the book that, from the sound of it, it never really happened, but his cool idea was to have a school where you would go into one studio and look at your reference, look at your figure and study it, and then walk to a completely different room on the other side of the building, taking a couple minutes, and go sit down at an easel and paint, and kind of paint everything you study and observe. The hidden wisdom here is that it would force you to not rely on your eyes, but on your understanding thus far, and your imagination. And we're back to this bit of bad sounding advice now. So in order for you to grow, while still using reference, you need to adapt this kind of philosophy where you're getting the reference, but you're not exactly using it. So here's my advice, and something that I try to do myself. Actively search out, take photos, and collect a variety of references. Then, don't use them. I particularly like taking the photos method because it forces you to contend with the subject no matter what, and somewhat on a deeper level. For example, if you need a foreshortening reference of your arm or whatever, any kind of complex anatomy, then you should take the photo of the right angle yourself. And naturally, you'll have to align the perspective with your own eye and with the camera. And in the process, you'd understand way more about the anatomy than you would if you Googled it or something. Even using Google or, God forbid, Image AI will get your mind cooking into the possibilities. You know the reference gathering experience. You really don't find the right image or whatever right away. Remember, as you find everything that won't work, you're also building a visual library for the possibilities. Let me say, I know there are many of us out there who thrive on reference. I know I do. And especially Robert Henry really thought reference was important. But even if you're using reference, you need to have this separation between using the reference and making your art. So at least humor it for a day and give it a try.
Very nice.
Tip number 2, be lazy. No joke here, I literally mean, it's exactly how it sounds, be lazy. To explain, let's mosey into comics, shall we? I'm a comic artist and creator. I'm currently working on my self-published, short-ish type of series called Star Circuit. It's a cyberpunk action drama centered around a futuristic race where androids, not humans, dominate the sport. Needless to say, I've drawn a lot of pages. Not as many as a full-time mangaka or a sole comic artist, but enough to be in an intermediate stage of mileage, we'll say. Through the hundreds of hours I put in, I found a key focus point, especially for all us type A artists. You know, the tryhards. When trying to create a detailed, engaging piece of storytelling, sometimes you can drill down to the point where you overload what would otherwise be a well-balanced page. I mean, for a focal point to actually work, you can't focus on everything. So, you see where we're headed here. When I draw these days, and what I recommend is try and plan out when and where you put your energy, and in contrast, where and when you get lazy. In comics, this can really translate to deciding which panel on the page will become a low lift panel, one that you're not going to really break your back on. You know what I mean? For those type of panels that are low lift, they can be like an extreme close-up, an extreme lighting setup, maybe a tight medium with no background that doesn't take a whole lot of time, a silhouetted scene, or something like that. You know, like one where you're not going to break your mind or your hand trying to figure out how to make it all work. And because of this, your focus on something else that you put extreme energy into will actually land a little better. What is important is that you intentionally get lazy and not get lazy where it counts, your focal point. A focused artist, storyteller, or person in general knows that sacrifices have to be made, so you might as well be deliberate and let your own hand, heart, and mind indulge in some laziness.
Good answer. Good answer.
Number 3, don't correct your mistakes.
Why?
In fact, throw in a few mistakes on purpose. More on that soon. But yes, you heard me right. Adapting your mistakes rather than correcting them and erasing them tend to lead more to understanding, faster workflows, and in many cases, growth of your style. As you know, internet art media consumer, watcher, viewer person, drawing traditionally has taken a back seat these days, and drawing digitally has become the standard. And in some cases now, barely drawing at all is acceptable. So, the most interesting thing you can do in today's day and age to push your work is to let go of the undo. You know, that Control-Z button, or the eraser if you're older than 30? For me, Control-Z became a problem and has contributed to many of my slow process hindrances. So what happens when you don't erase or Control-Z constantly? You're forced to contend with the actual creativity that's underneath it all. Like that splotch or that blemish that you have on the page suddenly becomes a convenient restriction if you let it. And we all know what they say about setting up restrictions. It leads to better creativity, thinking, problem solving, and I believe pushing you further into the flow state. While I'm on the subject, I have a feeling that many of our habitual undos and compulsive erasing make up about a third of the time you spend creating. So logically, if you took even half of those times and instead just went with the flow and started incorporating and pivoting and creatively dodging those mistakes, you would speed up your process a whole lot. And the best thing is, it wouldn't be from like hastily trying to etch the lines faster, but by not taking a step back every time you took a step forward. When you think about it, someone's art style is as much about doubling down on their strengths as how much they selectively not draw something at all. I talk about this at length on my third round of the comic artist style breakdown videos found here. From this perspective, both positive and negative aspects of your art all contribute to your style. That means that little mistakes that can be found in everybody's art are the cornerstones to finding the style element that may be uniquely setting you apart from the pack. If you never embrace the mistakes, then you may be losing out on the key thing that your style is built upon.
How does this work, Mac?
Here's a little tip if you're having a little trouble with not erasing. If you work digitally, try disabling the Control-Z shortcut. I've done it a few times. You can always turn it back on if it's too much of a change. Also, try to transition to using ink or paint more often on occasion. It'll get your mind thinking adaptively instead of maybe more like a perfectionist. And finally, when you're drawing, every time you hit a mistake, instead of reaching for that eraser, reach for the thinking cap instead, and try to focus on the creativity it would take to incorporate that mistake into your work.
That was all right. Good job.
So those are the few tips that I always feel odd about recommending because they have such a counterintuitive wording to them. But they truly have leveled up my work, and I'm sure they will help you on your art journey. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments if you have any tips that have some hidden wisdom, or maybe they sound a little odd. Now, last, follow me on X, and if you guys are interested in getting a good art tip every week that you can read in just a couple minutes, the sign up is in the description. And as always, be good, everybody.